Hi, my name is James Andrella, and you're listening to the Back to Human podcast. On the show with me today, I have the author of Raising Lions, Joe Newman. Joe has quite the reputation for working with some of the most difficult kids, and he works with parents and teachers he teaches them simple and practical methods to understand and motivate our children. During Jade's second pregnancy, we picked up a handful of books because we were having quite a rough time with our first son, Jax. And to be honest, nothing really stuck. It just led to more confusion and more frustration. It was honestly getting to the point where I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time with him. And this is my son. I love him to death. He was having very, very frequent tantrums in excess. And it felt like we were just walking on eggshells at all times and trying to do things in a way that was least likely to set him off. And we kind of figured that this was due to Jade being pregnant, and maybe it was a cry for attention or him just feeling uneasy with any emotions that were coming up because he didn't know what the change was going to look like. But it didn't make a whole lot of sense because I spend quite a lot of time with him. I'm not on my phone, I'm very present with the family, and we just could not find an answer for this. And frankly, we were at our wits' end. That was until I finally got around to reading Joe's book. And after implementing his method just one time, we noticed such a drastic difference in his temperament that I had to get Joe on the show because I feel like this type of information in his method is invaluable. And honestly, it was quite fun to be around him again. I didn't like feeling that as a parent, and we just really didn't know where to turn. I'm not going to mention any of the other books, but again, it led to a lot of confusion, and I didn't want to just be the parent that like shut him in his room and locked him in his room for a timeout and let him uh, just deal with his emotions on his own. I knew that he was kind of having a rough time. He didn't really know how to deal with whatever was coming up for him. But it was getting to that point, which I did not like. So today, we're going to dive into what it means to raise a lion and how Joe developed his method. Without further ado, Joe, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, nice to meet you, James. Appreciate your candidness right there to start, and I think a lot of parents can relate.
I mean, I'm sure that has to come up quite frequently, so maybe we can go a little bit further into the episode. Um, I do have this question actually further along, like the differentiating between attention, what is a cry for attention, and what is actually a cry for a boundary. So we'll get into that future. But how did you develop your method? As I read in your book, you were quite the, um, I guess, problem child, if we
Yeah,
can call it that.
yeah.
You were a lion yourself. So how did you develop your method?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of the reverse of how I think a lot of methods get developed. In that, first I lived it. I was that kid. I was inside that mind. I know why they're angry. Uh, and then I started to understand it, and then I wrote about it, and then I taught it. And that progression is important because it's actually kind of essential to how I think children learn, which is they learn from experiences. So, I was the poster child for ADHD. They studied me at the National Institutes of Health and at Johns Hopkins University. I lived in Maryland, and now I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed being, as a precocious, 6-year-old in a laboratory with all these smart grad students, and they're putting wires to my head, and they're showing me psychedelic movies, and I'm watching the machines go, and it was. But on the other end, I did feel like, particularly in school, I was lazy and broken, and I carried around the 10,000 things that I was told, you know, about what I did wrong and how I didn't understand, and maybe I didn't try hard enough. So it kind of builds on you in a sense where you feel like I must not care about others. I must not care about myself. I must not be a good person because I know these things are wrong, and I can't stop myself. So, eventually I made it through school. I went to college. I dropped out after 7 weeks, shaved my head in a mohawk. It's like 1981. And then just took off surfing for a couple of years and, 30 different jobs. And so eventually, at the end of like 10 years of that, as wild as it sounds, the world was much nicer to me than school was in that I was successful. I could learn on my own. there seemed to be a point to things. I didn't have to sit still. I could attend. And, basically at one point I realized I need some more meaning in my life. And I spent about 5 days in prayer, and I came out the other end going, oh my God, I got to reach those kids that are having the same experience that I went through. And walked into a school and volunteered. And that was the takeoff. That was 30 years ago.
So since you mentioned that school didn't really treat you as well as the world seemed to, how much of the behavior that you see with kids or that you're even working with kids still actively, how much do you think is attributable to the environment?
Most of it.
Most of it, yeah.
And there's different environments. So that
Even
you
a home.
have. Yeah, it's like always think about three environments that are influencing behavior. The one is the mind of the child, right? Everyone's got their own individual set of characteristics, preferences, leanings, abilities, characteristics, et cetera. But the second is the family dynamic, okay, and the community dynamic. But third, and the one that's most invisible, is that we live in a time in history that is where we are soaking in certain ideas and mythologies and frameworks. And a lot of those are broken. A lot of those are wrong. And we don't even realize that we take them in. We've been soaking in them. And so parents try to work from those ideas to come to solutions. And a lot of the conventional wisdom is not wisdom. And it's leading parents to frustrations like yours.
Mhm. I've had a few guests on the podcast where we kind of talk about how even adults, they're almost like grown children. Like we have an adult body, but
Yeah.
like mine.
Yeah.
So how are we going to lead from that position then? If we are learning from this, just mythology or like the false wisdom.
Yeah, see, I think people, just like children are smarter than we think, I think parents are smarter than we give them credit for. Honestly, parents know when things are going south. Parents know, like, when they're using methods that don't feel authentic and they're speaking in ways that feel weird, and they're not getting their needs met or getting reciprocity, or they're seeing their child not rise to the ability that they have a capacity for. Parents know that. They know something's up. And if anything, is like the response of our children will lead us to better answers
Mhm.
until
Yeah.
we get the response we know they're capable of. So, parents are fine. It's just we live in a difficult time, and they're given a lot of bad information and a lot of bad assumptions about children. And once that shifts and they kind of get a clearer path forward, like you did in a day, a lot of things will change. And then as things change, like like I said, for me, I lived it, then I understood it, then I taught it. They have to live it first. They have to see the results, and then they start to understand it. It's not
Mhm.
really the other way around. They have a problem, you know, to solve it first.
And what you mentioned in your book that I kind of loved because now it gave me like a different point of view, how viewing his actions is that they're just little researchers, like they're testing their hypothesis. They're seeing where the boundaries are and just kind of what they can get away with. Like, okay, if I whine this much, I don't get my toy, but if I whine just a little bit more, mommy, daddy might give in. So they're
Yeah.
always testing. They're your greatest teachers.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the what you touched on right there is the key misunderstanding that is dominant right now, which is, um, conventional parenting, popular parenting experts are teaching parents that when children misbehave, it's because they don't understand. Because they're frail, because they're unable to control themselves, because they're unable to understand, because their feelings are too big for them to possibly get a grip on. All of this is it's victim mentality, and it's instilling that in our children. And once you realize that actually our children are smarter than we think, and that their conflicts ask a question, that simple thing, conflict asks a question. Once you start understanding that, everything starts to unravel for parents,
Mhm.
So, a 3-year-old You're trying to get them ready to bring them to daycare, and you're making them breakfast, and they always want the blue bowl. And one day they're like, I want the red bowl. And you just put that in the dishwasher, but they want the red bowl, and it means the world to them. Um, Now, a conventional view would say they just have such a big feeling. But actually, the simpler answer is no, they're asking a question. Who's in charge? How does this work? Can I dominate you? Can I train you? And if they can, they don't come into the new kind of connection they do as they grow older. They try to keep going back to sort of their infantile state, which creates anxiety and chaos because they see how much power they have and they realize I'm not the smartest one in the room, but I'm certainly the most powerful, and that's a drag. So once you start seeing the question in there, the sort of deeper question that children are all asking, um, all of a sudden your response can change and makes more sense. It's
Mm,
not such a mysterious, conflict.
mm. And what you mentioned in your book is that leads to more of a sensation for them of omnipotence, where they don't really have this great integration. And if I guess there's a period where if that's not taught, not instilled, like you have to kind of work interrelationally with the people that are around you, whether that be your mom, your dad, or just other kids too, you have this overwhelming sense of power and it's too much for them. So it creates that anxiety. They don't necessarily feel safe.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think then, this sort of speaks to this shift that takes place and how children, the meet the hand approach, which you read about in the book, right? So the meet the hand is sort of a metaphor for the struggle that children are going through and why the question comes up. And that's because children start out with this feeling of connectedness, where they feel like you and them are one. And that lasts for like at least a year and a half. And and there's a sort of fearlessness and joy to that one-year-old where, they'll do anything because they don't think they're ever in danger because you're just like an extension to them who stops in any danger or catches them before they fall, or there's a sort of giddy happiness to that starts to shift at about 14 to 18 months, sometimes a little earlier. And, because they realize, "Oh, wow, we're separate. We're not like one big organism that just moves in response to my will." And this is kind of a scary moment where they start to go, "Wait a minute, we are separate. How does that work?" And so they start to see if they start to exercise control over everything. That's what terrible twos are. That's all of these tantrums that don't make any sense. They all make sense once you realize their answer trying to figure out who's in control. Are you like me? How does this work? And until they answer that question, you're going to have an anxious child who's constantly testing the limits in ways that seem sometimes weird and bizarre. Like, really? You loved the blue yesterday. Now it's the red. Why right now? You know, I have to get to work. So there's all of these things that start to, and that meet the hand is about making the connection, right? So the meet the hand metaphor for people who have not read the book, it's those questions can be thought of as like a hand coming up and going, I'm here, I have power. Like imagine it pressing up. I'm here, I have power. Are you here? Do you have power? Now, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, it was authoritarian response. So it was negate that child. No, you know, you grabbed another cookie. I'm smacking your hand. You go in your room for a timeout. I'm tired of this. You need to listen to mommy. It's big. It's emotional. It's punitive. Okay, it's negating. And then it switched to all information. Right. Oh, I see you want a cookie. You must have a really big feeling about the cookie. I understand you want that. So you can have the cookie this time, but next time I want you to tell mom. But there's no real hand met there. It's just sort of a backing up away from them. So the hand reaching up has a hand that doesn't meet theirs. And that feeling is abandonment, is alone. I alone have power. I'm alone willful like this. And what meet the hand is it's an approach that allows you to set a boundary. And so those two hands come together and meet in the middle. that answers the fundamental question with, yes, you're here. Yes, you have power. I'm also here. I also have power.
Mm,
Because they need a new kind of connection, not one where they have, where they have no responsibility and they have all the power. That's fine if they're an infant. They're not capable of responsibility. But by 2, things are shifting and we need them to step up. And so they're going to fight that stepping up to that. And, you know, but when you can meet that boundary, it sounds like you did the first night when you tried the method, all of a sudden you recognized your son, you saw him, and you didn't move with a very specific kind of boundary that you didn't do a lot of talking about. And
mhm,
you watch somebody settle and you repeat that and they come into a new relationship, which is an interconnected relationship with other people where other people's lives have value like theirs.
mhm. You mentioned, I think it was towards, like, the later end of the book, where if you are giving too much information, it's almost guaranteed that the power dynamic is in their favor, like, they're dominating you in a sense. They have the power, you hold no power, you're not withholding any type of, boundaries for them, so, yeah, they don't feel safe. And this is what I've read in the other books that was so confusing to me and so frustrating because it's like, I'm trying to understand where these big emotions are coming from, and I just don't get it. I could talk to you all day. It's like, this logically doesn't make sense. Granted, they're probably not really operating from a rational sense if they are in a full blown tantrum. But it didn't work. It led to more frustration. And then, as you stated, kids are smarter than we give them credit for. So if they've engaged in behavior multiple times, and you've told them, at a certain point, they know that they're engaging in behavior that they shouldn't be. So they're testing the boundary in that sense, no? And by continuing to tell them what they're doing wrong, in a sense, you're almost kind of dumbing them down. You're assuming that they're not as smart as they are.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think there's a quote I have it actually on the other screen. It's from Alison Gopnik. She's a developmental psychologist, um, I think at University of California, Berkeley. And so she does research on what babies understand, 14-month-olds, 18-month-olds, and then 2 and 3-year-olds. And she says babies are making calculated calculations with conditional probabilities that they're revising to figure out how the world works. Okay. So this is babies. She's doing this and seeing this between 14 and 18 months. And it sounds like it sounds more complicated than it is, this condition with conditional probability. But the reality is conditional probability just is that, if I'm with mommy and she tells me no more playing and I cry, there's a 50% chance that she'll allow me to keep playing half the time. And this is an intuitive thing. But with daddy, um, uh, the crying doesn't work. But if I'm really sweet, he'll always do it. Right. That's conditional probability. That's how you're figuring out how the world works. And so your behavior changes in all of these different kind of places. And so the weird thing about this is key to development. It's like children watch, observe, they build models based on what's happening, not based on what you say. What you say, even if you're going, hey, that's not what I want, it's this, this, and this, it's typically in a very nice tone, it's filled with attention, it's a reinforcer. It's like you want to explain how, it makes you feel bad when this happens or you're late to work. What their experience is I just got another 2 minutes of your one-on-one time for behavior you want me to stop. So the reason we went there is that consequences for decades, maybe millennia, right, were paired with negation, were paired with yelling or spanking or shaming. And I think in our minds, we connect those two things. We connect a consequence with some sort of mean or unkind tone. And that's completely arbitrary. It might have been going on for 2,000 years, but it's still arbitrary. And I think the new step is can you be strict about a boundary and kind and respectful at the same time without shaming, without moralizing? That's a radical shift for a lot of people. But once they start doing it, they move out of this sort of cause and effect or good and bad frame, and they go into, they move from reward and punishment or good and bad to cause and effect and administering that so that they learn and allow them to do that. And don't resent the challenges, but you have to frustrate them.
Mm,
All of a sudden, everything starts to
mm.
move. Right.
Yeah. I remember reading the passage where I think the school kid, he didn't want to do any of his work. So then he was frustrating the teachers, but then what you had to do is you had to flip it and make him frustrated with the behavior. So, okay, well, if you don't do your homework, then that's fine, but you're not going out to recess until you finish your homework.
Yeah.
So flipping the frustration. And before, what I like so much about this method is it gives me something to come back to that's consistent, that feels good.
Yeah.
Because when we do a break, especially we're going to get into tone in a little bit. Now I'm coming from it, or I'm coming into it with a neutral perspective instead of just being frustrated and angry. It's like I know what I'm expected to do during a break, which is just be calm, be present, don't give too much information, um, and use a very neutral tone as opposed to something that's angry and just frustrating myself. It's like they're going to mirror whatever we're giving off. Correct?
Yeah. Exactly. I also think, your your question at the core of this is like the importance of a neutral or non-judgmental perspective, right? Or
Mhm.
and I think and I was thinking about that because the deeper question is, you know, why do parents get mad? Why do they yell? Because I don't think parents get mad or that nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Today I'm really lose it with my 4-year-old or 5-year-old. I'm gonna yell and I'm gonna stomp around and I'm gonna lose my with them." And nobody does that. Certainly nobody listening to a podcast about parenting, who's tuning in now. These are people who are working hard to do their best. Now, having said that, probably most of the people who have children who are listening have yelled at their children. So let's ask why and solve that problem to start with, which is I think that um, I think that parents yell at their children because it's just too much. There's sometimes overwhelming odds against them or complete lack of cooperation or dysregulation. Um, and it becomes super hard and they see them and maybe ignore them when they know they understand. They see them not using any self-regulation when they know they're capable of it. And those things pile up. And at some point, parents blow up.
Mhm.
It's like a backpack that where, uh, moment after moment, you're allowing your child to drop a 10-pound bag of flour in your backpack, and then another
Mhm.
10, another 10. At some point, you're holding 200 pounds, and that's why you're angry. There's a back and forth. So behavior is super important. So I don't want to just say parents should learn how to carry 200 pounds of frustration at all times and still be the Buddha. I want I want to realize we're human. And we have to acknowledge that back and forth and know how to draw out much better behavior from our children as well. Now, yeah, there's a couple levels to that about the tonality. I think some of that comes to understanding the reason for those challenges and defiance, and that also helps you to shift into a
Mhm.
more sort of calm and relaxed place. Yeah.
Mhm. Before we dip into tone a little bit more, I wanted to rewind back to when you said meeting the hand. So you have meeting the hand, avoiding the hand, and smashing the hand, which we kind of got into a little bit with spanking. And admittedly, I've engaged in both of those. So I did spanks, and they don't feel good.
Yeah.
I thought that they were a means to an end, but it didn't feel good for me, didn't feel good for him, and either way, it wasn't effective. That's what I was kinda talking about during Jade's, my wife's 2nd pregnancy. We didn't have anywhere to run to, and these were kinda like the defaults. So your method now provides that default. It's like a system. It's a
Yeah.
system that I can fall back to that is, again, safe for me, and I feel like it's effective for my son as well because now he is getting the hand met. So what would be meeting the hand, an example of that, avoiding the hand, which would be me walking out of the door and then smashing the hand. How does your approach differ from really those?
Right. So what my approach does is it sort of accepts the conflict. It doesn't resent the conflict. Let's start there. It's like the conflict's part of growing up. It's okay. But they can't win those conflicts. Okay. So we don't resent them. We don't judge them. And how do you handle that conflict? How do you handle that conflict in a way that the relationship is better after the conflict and not worse? And so, an example of avoiding the hand, as a parent who simply keeps engaging in more conversation, not setting a boundary. Meanwhile, the time they're later to work. Meanwhile, the other kid is crying. Meanwhile, they're not able to finish dinner. Meanwhile, the child is maybe calling them names. If maybe even the child is saying, "You're stupid. I hate you," and this is left unaddressed. And you just keep pursuing it with information because in that and that the experience of that is really parents are trying to build a connection in that avoid the hand, right? By just giving complete recognition of the child, but not asking for any in return. Okay. So that's avoid the hand. Child experiences that as abandonment, not as connection. If they were 6 months old, they'd experience that as connection, but they're trying to create the connection that was keep the connection that has to change and become a new one. Okay. Squashing the hand is shaming, uh, big punishment. I need you to go to your room. I'm tired of this behavior. Stay there until, until you've learned your lesson. I'll come get you. I don't know how long it is. The tone of that, you have a consequence. So they're coming up against something, but you're pairing that with negation, with judgment, with isolation. Okay. So the first one negates the adult and recognizes the child. The second one recognizes the adult, negates the child. What I'm looking for is, what you're likely doing with your son now, which is like, I need you to take a break for a minute. You can sit right there. You don't have to leave the room. And he argues, why? Why did, we can't talk about it till after. But when you're finished, if you want to know why, we can talk about it. But I don't want to do it. Just say why. In 5 seconds, it will become a 3-minute break instead of a 1-minute break. 5, 4. You can't make me. It's up to you. 1, 0. Okay, now you have the 3-minute break. Then maybe does the break. Afterwards, I, I'm like, are you okay or do you need to talk about it? I'm okay. Great. He doesn't want to talk about it. I don't make him talk about it. Sometimes I need, but that's like 1 in 100 times. What he's just experienced is that during that process, I recognized his power. I didn't judge him. I didn't even talk about the behavior. Why didn't I talk about the behavior? Because he can figure it out. Okay. Because as soon as you start talking about it, um, it's not like you're solving a cognitive problem um, that they have. And this goes to the 3 kinds of behavior. In most cases, children can figure it out. If they can't, Um, so and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you brought up the 3 kinds of behavior when you sent me the email.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe let me turn it over to you, what your thoughts on that were and how you want to open that up.
Well, yeah, let's wait a little bit for that. But what would be the importance of coming in with the tone? Because we've kind of touched on that a little bit, and you're saying judgmental. So again, that helped me so much because now I know what is expected of me during a break, and now I have something to ground to. Um, but why is it so important to come in with a neutral, non-judgmental tone, even if it's something like really bad?
2 reasons. One is the first thing you want is your child's reciprocity and self-control in that moment. Okay. They've just smacked their 1-year-old sister. It's bad. Right. And your your impulse is to lecture them about how horrible that is and show them how angry you are and just go, "What the hell are you doing? She's 1, she's fragile. What do you?" Let's start with just having them take the break. And it might be a longer break than 1 minute because, depending on the age of the child. But the first reason you don't want to be judgmental is it opens up a can of worms. Number 1, an argument. It makes it more difficult for them to self-regulate and to sit themselves down, okay? And it will breed a more defiant response, okay? So, when you have a calm tone and you say, "Look, I need you to sit and this is gonna happen," and you're very strict about that, and you don't have to affect trying to be nice when your 1-year-old is crying because they just got smacked. You can be just, "Look, I need you to take a break now." 5 seconds is gonna become a bigger break, and because the first thing you want is them to take an action, and you want them to sit, and the rest of it starts to change from that standpoint. Once they sit on their own, and you haven't even told them why, they start to problem solve and figure it out, and so instead of a reactive thinker, you have a proactive thinker, solving that problem while they're sitting there. Maybe at the end, if it's a big deal, you do say, "So I need you to talk to me about why I gave you the break." Again, you're asking them to solve the problem. Okay. So much of defiance in children, which is rampant right now in one way or another, it comes from the fact that we steal their autonomy from them. Right? Has your son started saying, "I do it, I do it"?
Um, Sometimes, but we really like try to include him with a lot of things. I did notice in the beginning of your book, you mentioned how we give children too many choices now,
Yeah.
and that like shoots us in the foot. But not so much I do it, but there is something that I want to address later
Okay.
where I need to know where this is coming from.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
it's pretty much just saying no to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. It could be something completely random that doesn't even no does not warrant or the answer does not include no, but he says
Right.
no. What? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Well, I think that's a way to assert autonomy. It's a way to
yeah.
assert your power in any given moment. It's just children become fascinated with power. I think children are much more interested in power than we give them credit for. We sort of speak to them as if they just want our approval or disapproval, but a lot of children are more fascinated with power. And saying no to everything is a great way to get a response, right? It's
Yeah.
like, really, if you think about the biggest power move you can do in any given situation, when somebody asks you something, when somebody about anything, is just to start with no, right? Just push back. It's a way of saying, I'm here. I do what I want to do. Look at me. I make choices. It's a power move and it's a natural one. Right. So I think, that no is, it's built in. And I will say that it comes out more the more information you give. So the more you're explaining things, the more you're taking the moment away from them to figure it out on their own. So those things are tied together. Okay. So I think that the part of the problem of, you know, um, too much information is it lowers our expectation of them and it takes the space that they want to fill. They want to figure things out. You
Yeah.
see what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. So moving on to the behaviors now. So there's the three. There's benign behavior, there's malignant, and there's impulsive, correct?
Yeah.
So would you mind explaining what each of those is and what warrants a break? And then we can go into what a break actually is because we've been talking about it the whole time. But what are the three different behaviors, benign, malignant, impulsive, and what consequence should be expected for each of those?
Right. So, you know what? Behavior is always going to fall into those three things. And so benign behavior is behavior that happens because the child doesn't understand something. So a girl comes into kindergarten for the first day, and at one moment, she's in class and they're all drawing at their tables, and she realizes I'm thirsty. And she gets up and she looks around, doesn't see a water fountain, and sees a door and goes out the door and wanders down the hall and wanders down another hall looking for a water fountain. And at some point, teacher realizes, oh my God, Melissa's gone. And Melissa's gone, like, call the office. We're missing a child. No one saw her just casually walk out. Now, you don't want to punish that behavior, you know, um, and you don't want to lecture her about she needs an explanation. Hey, at school, before you go you can't go out of the room until you talk to somebody. Because we've got a lot of kids here. So that needs an explanation. It warrants an explanation. It happened because she doesn't understand how school works yet. Okay. But most behavior doesn't fall into that category, most problem behavior. Most, so most of it is malignant, which means they understand the boundary. Okay. Or they could easily figure it out. So that just means, um, that, you reach over and you grab the crayons from the kid next to you. Okay. If you went over to that kid and you said, James, um, let's say you gave them a break and then afterwards, however, but in one case or another, if before you said anything to James, you said, James, I'll give you the Star Wars Lego set if you can tell me what I have a problem with here. James would tell you. James would
Mhm.
figure it out. And that simple measurement, that's a simple mental test to do. And I ask a lot of parents to sort of think about their day, or teachers think about their day. Every time you're going to mention and talk about a behavior and address something in its specificity, you should ask yourself, if highly motivated, could that child figure it out? Because if they can, it was detrimental for you to tell them. You stole a moment that they could problem solve. Okay. Um, and then the third kind of behavior is impulsive behavior. Impulsive behavior is, it's like raising your hand. Quite often, I was a kid who would speak first, raise my hand second. That just always. That's 100% of the time. I was a kid who was quick to push somebody and grab something. Um, that's why when my mom brought me to the playground as a kid, as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, parents would spot us and they'd gather up their kids and go home. I mean, that's the reality. I was a very impulsive kid. So with an impulsive kid, they understand it, but they don't, but they can't stop themselves. So once
Mm.
you understand those three things, you can decide, well, when does it make sense to talk about a behavior, and when does it make sense to consequence behavior? And for me, I think anything that's a malignant behavior, you don't need an explanation for. An explanation is counterproductive. It communicates a low expectation. It robs the moment of where they can solve the problem. So a break is a perfect response. Okay. Now, I also think for kids that are super hyper, like I was, who are impulsive, a break is also a great response because you're not reminding them of the thing they already know, which kind of pollutes the relationship. If I'm telling you 5 times an hour, keep your hands to yourself, James, keep your hands to yourself, James, I told you, keep your hands to yourself. Our relationship is based on me telling you why you're wrong all the time.
Mhm.
Okay. And it's going to spur defiance. Where if I just say, hey, I need to take a break, and you come right back and I take the charge out of it, all I'm doing is letting you do a prefrontal cortex exercise of controlling yourself, acknowledging my need, doing it, coming back. And I'm not reminding you what you're doing wrong. Okay. But I'm helping you adjust the muscles you need to live in that classroom. Now, and in malignant, in benign behavior, like the girl walking out of the class, um, you can give a break as well. You can give an explanation. Either one is fine. An explanation is not going to be counterproductive. You can also do a break as long because if you're doing a break properly, you're taking the judgment out of it. You're not, assuming she did anything wrong. So take a break for a minute, and then we'll talk. And then you give her the break, and you say, "Hey, you can see she's confused. Why did I give you a break? I don't know. Oh, if you don't understand, let me you know, so in the class, what happened? I went looking for water. I get it. So you don't understand that in the class, we worry about you when you leave. So you've got to ask permission before you walk out of the classroom. So those three things that they sort of change the way that we deal with behavior. And if you look at how most people deal with behavior, which is all conversations, it doesn't solve the problems of the 90% of behavior or maybe 80% of behavior that's malignant, that can figure it out or already knows where the boundary is. You're repeating the information doesn't help. It makes things, worse and kind of pollutes the relationship.
So, how would one initiate a break? What does a break actually look like then, since we've been talking about it so much?
Well, let me ask you how, because I'm curious how you did your first one just from reading the book, because uh, I don't want to jump in and influence your perspective. I'd love to hear your perspective from reading the book and how it looked the first time you did it with your son.
Okay. So I will say that I didn't really give him a moment to. You mentioned, "Hey, I need you to take a break over here," and if they don't go to the spot, then it can progress to a break. So what I did, and you can correct this if you feel like it needs some work. I'm back now. We have a little beanbag chair, which I use as his break chair,
Yeah.
and I'll ask him the very first time, I did not ask him to take a break over here because it was very fresh to me, very new. I didn't even know how it was gonna go,
Right.
and I got quite a bit of pushback the very first time. It was like, "What are you talking about? We've never done this before." Um, so got him on the beanbag chair. He wanted to get off of it. Obviously, he was fighting me back, and I was just very, very calm. I said, "Right now, you have a 1-minute break. All you need to do is you need to sit on the chair." And what was most important to me, because I wrote this down too, is not really like talking back. I came in with a neutral tone. I didn't want to kind of give him any points where he could argue. So I wasn't really talking besides the little points of you have a 1-minute break. It starts when you're on your chair. You must be quiet. There's no getting up from the chair. Once we're done with the break, then you can go play with the toys or whatever he was screaming about at the time. He wanted his towel, he wanted this toy, he wanted to be in the living room. I'm like, "You can go in the living room as soon as you finish your break." Currently, it's a 1-minute break, and then within a certain amount of time, it expanded to 5 minutes. He's only done one-minute break. Everything so far has been a 5-minute break, but as, um, as you mentioned earlier, I see Jax, my son, like the cogs whirring. I see his brain thinking about what he's currently doing or why he is in the position that he's in. So that's how I initiated the breaks, and very shortly after that, his demeanor was just completely different. And the energy in the house, the environment, it was more lighthearted and easygoing. Again, we weren't walking on eggshells, but that's what I've done so far.
Right.
Um, as far as getting him to just take a break in, like, one spot, that hasn't really been too effective for me yet. He needs to go through the full break, which would be the 5 minutes of no talking, being quiet, and he's gotta be on his beanbag chair. That's what I've done.
So it's interesting. First of all, I think that's a very typical and I think well done first attempt, right? First processing the breaks, and the interesting thing for me is listening to the results, right? Because I'm going to give you sort of a whole tweaking of that in a moment, but
Sure.
but you notice that after doing it a couple times, his demeanor changed. There's a more lighthearted sense in the house. You had more sort of reciprocity and connection
Mhm.
um, with him. And that was the result of simply him meeting the hand in a firm way, right?
Yeah.
In a way that was like, oh, I'm here. I also have power. And because children respond to that emotionally. And I have parents who have much really dramatic first breaks where even after even when I've coached them, it's going to be dramatic the first time. So where they have to hold them and there's a long tantrum and there's kicking and screaming and, crying and then, they settle, who afterwards will report that an hour later or half an hour later, the child was made like such a loving statement or was so connected with them they hadn't seen that before. Like a profound shift in their connection with the child maybe says for the first time to dad, "Daddy, I love you." Right? Um,
Mhm.
and and they're like, "Oh my God, what?" And that's because it that's your proof is that that this acting out is asking a question. Are you here? Are you like me? And when you just held a space and waited till he settled and then ended that, you were basically saying, I'm like you, I'm willful, but I don't hold it against you. I'll let you finish whatever you need to finish until you meet my need. And when you meet my need, we'll move forward. And that's those two hands coming together and just waiting until there's recognition. So you got recognition. And that changed the whole tone of the house, right?
Mhm.
So now moving forward, right? There's a couple different things that you're going to want to alter so that you have better success and you get to that point where the 1 minute break is happening. But I will say that this process has to be repeated, and then the child will adapt into it to do the 1 minute break. No matter how perfectly a parent does, the things I'm going to talk about in a moment. Typically, the first time you do it with a 3-year-old or a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old, they're not going to take the 1 minute break. They're going to test it. Why? Because they're a scientist. Why? Because they know from their research that this is not going to, um, and I will digress for a second because the girl in the book that I call Madison,
Mhm.
right? When I first trained a team of 7 people at a school to do the break steps with her, it was like we called it a break at the focus desk, a longer break at the focus desk, and then she got aggressive, she'd have to leave the room. If she got super aggressive, she'd have to go to the crisis room. Okay, and so these were these steps. And for the first 5 days they did this approach, she never took the 1 minute break. Now she was 8 and she was at a school for very extreme kids, but she never took that break. And the teacher said, I don't think this is working. And I said, give it some time. She's got 8 years of getting everybody else to walk on eggshells. You know, she thinks she's the boss. She's got 8 years to prove it. Just repeat the process. And it was 10 days in when she did her first 1 minute break. But once that happened, everything started to change. And 10 weeks later, she was not violent anymore. And 6 months after that, she was back in a regular school, without medications, without a one-on-one aid. So things transformed fairly quickly. And then what what I want parents like yourself to be able to do is to set up a simple process that allows the same thing to happen in terms of him doing a break on his own. So the way that looks is, first of all, always start, unless you have to stop a aggressive behavior, hitting or throwing or something, always start with a 1 minute break. And
Mm.
when you say the 1 minute break, um, have him do it someplace close by. Okay. If the beanbag chair is in another room, don't make him go to the beanbag chair. If it's in the room, that's fine. But point to a place nearby. And without going to him and trying to get him to go, just say, I need you to take a break. You can sit right there. Now, know that he's going to object and whine, and you're going to say, look, you can take the 1 minute break or you don't take the 1 minute break. It's up to you. But in a moment, I'm going to count. And when I'm finished counting, if you're not sitting, it becomes a 3 minute break. Now, you still haven't gone up and tried to move or cajole him to do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He's got his arms crossed. No. Hey, okay, that's fine. But now you have a 3 minute break. I'll let you decide. You know, in a moment, I'm going to count again. Tell me why I have a break. I can't talk about it till after. But, and then he's screaming and look, in 5 seconds, it becomes the holding break, and I have to hold you until you take the long break. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you stop talking and you hold him and you wait. Or you just wait. With a 3-year-old, he's going to cry and he's going to have a tantrum, and you just contain him until he's not hitting you or kicking you or biting you. And just hold him so that you've got him in one place. And really, you're going to wait. You're not going to talk too much. You let him settle himself down and have his tantrum if he's having one. And then say, look, let me know when you're ready. Okay. So you want to do those steps because you're just laid out a very simple map that he's going to perceive by the second or third time you do it. So be detached that he does that first step or the second step, but just do it in a very consistent way. Here, this happens, 15 seconds later, this happens, 15 seconds later, this happens. It's like, if you're in LA, it's like driving down the 10 freeway. It's like you pick up your friend at the airport and you go, hey, listen, you're going to need to get off at La Cienega if you want to, get to the hotel. You have to pull over in the next 15 seconds. They miss the exit. You're like, not a big deal. You can get off at Fairfax, but it's going to take 3 minutes instead of 1. And we'll circle back. They missed that exit. You know what? We're going to have to go downtown. There might be some traffic. This is going to take a little while. Repeat. By the third time they're on the highway, they're getting off on La Cienega.
Hmm.
Your children are doing the same thing. They're looking for patterns. They're adapting. They want to know. That's the conditional probability scientist that Alison Gopnik's talking about when she's, talking about 14 and 18-month-olds.
It's funny. Without ever hearing your voice before and reading through your book, your voice somehow matches your writing, like, to a T. Like, as I was reading through the book, I'm reading it in your voice, although I had never heard it prior to listening to some of your podcasts before, but I just thought that was funny.
Oh, thank
And
you.
is there a point when the breaks would become too frequent and then you would need to escalate, or is like 5 minutes the end all be all break?
Yeah. So, this is a great question, and it's something actually teachers will ask because in any classroom you got a kid who needs a lot of breaks, and kids who don't need a lot of breaks, because breaks are functioning on 3 different levels, right? Um, and uh, and it's not just a matter of misunderstanding. So sometimes kids are impulsive. And I would just give you an example of a classroom that I coached a teacher actually that I was catching up with yesterday. And this is years ago. She was in Texas and teaching 4th grade. And I forgot the name of the boy, but she had a boy in the class who they'd warned her when he was coming in, like, we'll call him Brian. Brian is a handful. Brian's always in trouble. Brian can't keep his hands to himself. Brian's always get into something. And I had taught her to do the break process in class, which was don't talk about his behaviors. Don't lecture him about his behaviors. Give him 1-minute breaks. Try and give him early on. And so she used them with the whole class. But with Brian, she needed to use them once, twice, sometimes 4 times in any hour, right? So he was getting on average probably 10 breaks a day, every day.
Mm.
Um, and And at the the interesting thing for me is that, that would have been the approach and the quantity of breaks that I would have needed, right? As a kid, I would have been Brian. And, but from Brian's perspective, he had the best year ever. At the end of the year, she had him write, as every kid in the class wrote like a little letter to the incoming class that would come in the next year, like welcoming them to the 4th grade and telling them their experience. And Brian wrote, 4th grade is the best. That is the most fun class I've ever been in. You never get in trouble in 4th grade. Sometimes Miss Alexandra asks you to take a break, but if you take it for a minute and you can come right back in. You never miss recess, and she never sends mean notes to your mom. Okay, so Here was a boy who was naturally impulsive, who all of a sudden giving breaks on a regular basis helped him to survive class, help her to manage class, help him sort of gradually build those prefrontal cortex exercises and have a happy re- reciprocal relationship with his teacher. So now backing up, I think most parents will find that you don't want to, you're not trying to raise sort of a perfect robot child. Children are impulsive. Children are going to get into things. And there's definitely a honeymoon or what do you call it? A Goldilocks zone of knowing what breaks you can ignore and, what behaviors you can ignore and what behaviors you have to address. But I think the truth is you can give a break for anything if you need them to adjust and become more aware of something. Because everything shifts in the tone that you're doing them. And once you do them on a regular basis, it doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like a stoplight. It's like you might be in a hurry to a meeting. It's frustrating to catch all the lights, but you still stop. You don't take it personally. You don't feel bad about yourself because you caught 10 lights instead of 5. You just stop. They're part of your day. And that's how breaks should feel. Parents are setting boundaries in a language that children understand. Okay. And they're just allowing them to figure out and build the models about the world and who they are. And they're taking all the judgment out of their challenging of those things. And they're just frustrating them. Little bits of frustration, little stoplights. Okay. You want to give less information about behavior because that gives your children a chance to figure out more. They feel proud of themselves. You know.
Do you feel like this method would have helped you when you were a kid? I recall that you were on Ritalin. Was it Ritalin or Adderall?
Yeah.
You were medicated for
No, there
ADD.
wasn't an Adderall yet. Adderall sort of I think the extended release version of Ritalin are in the same class of drugs. But primarily I was on Ritalin from 1970 to maybe 1977. And yeah, absolutely. Because I think that the method, in some ways, all the work that I've done, and initially, when I said I lived it and then I sort of did it and taught it, um, in terms of the approach, is that initially, when I worked with kids, it just felt like having a conversation with my 8-year-old self, like all the time. Like I could see why they were. I didn't think out. Oh, it's good not to give them too much information because of blah 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 blah. Right? I just knew that I hated it when people were kept telling me what I already knew, and that children needed a firm boundary just so that they would regulate, but they also needed the kind of relationship around that where they felt recognized and not judged, right? Weren't constantly reminded of what they were doing wrong or constantly told the thing that they were supposed to do before they had a chance to do it themselves. So for me, not giving information this was just intuitive. I was just treating them the way I wanted to be treated,
Mhm.
and they responded really well.
Do you feel as though kids are being over medicated for some of their behavioral issues these days?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's because, I think I mentioned earlier is that there's 3 environments that children live in. They live in their own mind and the characteristics of that mind. They live in a family system that holds boundaries or doesn't hold boundaries or holds them in a particular way and not another way, right? And they live in a culture that has certain qualities. Among them right now is, besides ideas that are present, it's technology, how much exposure to technology, how much exposure to various kinds of stimulation, not a lot of downtime and boredom where there's nothing to do and nothing to entertain them, and all the ideas that go along with that, right? So when we look at a child and we make a decision that they've got a particular, pathology, we're mostly looking at the child, that the single environment. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, and not these other 2 spaces. Certainly not never the 3rd space, right? The 3rd space is the most invisible for most people. We assume we're just at some sort of pinnacle of knowledge that has never been reached before in history. But actually, we're repeating a lot of the same mistakes that people have done for the last, 2,500 years. So clearly, we're not wiser than our ancestors. We're probably just as wise, and we know certain things more than they do, and there's certain things we've got blind spots where they didn't. So for me, I often say that the culture right now has a whole industry, it has a bureaucracy, it has a legal system, it has an insurance system that's all built around a medical model, and they lead to certain conclusions, and they encourage certain conclusions, and they fund certain conclusions more than others. Um, and that's, in a sense, that's those are all attorneys for the prosecution. The prosecution that says there's something wrong with your child. Right? I'm the attorney for the defense.
Have you had any success stories of parents coming to you specifically for their children being on medication and then regressing off?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I
Yeah.
think most of the kids in the book um, were on one or various medications over years. Certainly, Madison had been on at least 6 different medications by the time I saw her when she was 8, and had gone through a couple different diagnoses at the time. And I mean, it's as simple as, like I am an ADHD person, right? But I don't think of that as a disorder. I think of that as a highly tangential thinker. So when you tell me, what do I think of Joe Rogan, I think of 15 different things I want to talk about. And and somebody else might think of 1 or 2. Okay. And each one of those things is leading to 15 other things. So the chances of me staying with you on the topic you wanted to stay on when you brought him up, and me thinking of that are kind of slim. There's like 5 other things I finding more interesting, and that's a kid in the classroom. They're the same way. So it's definitely a place on a spectrum of thinking that makes it hard to succeed in classroom, makes it hard for you to do that kind of learning. You might be better as apprenticing with a farmer or a carpenter, at that age. I don't know. But um, my approach is meant to mitigate that so that children have enough control, enough self-regulation, enough attention to survive school. I'm not gonna cure the ADD, right? I'm not gonna cure the tangential thinking. I really don't want to, but I want them to have the skills with that mind to have the self-regulation to succeed in school, ideally without medication. Now, sometimes they end up needing medication as well. That's I don't necessarily have something against medication. I just think that we use that. There are 10 tools in my woodshed, and I see people who go to 1 because it's the only one that's offered.
Mhm.
And you can mitigate that problem a number of different ways. And some problems are entirely caused by just a misunderstanding of child development and human interaction. And when you get the right set of them, the whole, particularly things that are entirely behaviorally driven, can turn around on their own.
I may have undiagnosed ADHD myself because my wife says that she can literally hear my brain whirring because
Yeah,
I look and I think, I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." But you said, that when you talk to children, it's as if you were talking to your 8-year-old self, and as I was reading the book, I started to kinda pick up on some of my own traits as well as I was
yeah,
reading through it. One thing that you mentioned was how praise can be detrimental, and, how I believe it was where if kids are praised too much, they're told, "Good job for this, good job for
mm,
that," too often, and maybe for work that's not even really that fantastic, that it is counterproductive and they think if they're praised in the future that they actually did something wrong. And this is actually something that I realized in my life too. Like I could do something that was pretty good, but someone would acknowledge it and I'd just be like, eh, they don't mean anything. So I was
Mm.
wondering, that popped up for me. How can praise be detrimental in that sense then?
Okay. So I think the question of praise is super important, and I appreciate your sort of reflection on it. I think the short answer of why praise is when praise is bad and when it's good is that praise is a good thing when it's a sincere expression of your feeling or observation, and particularly when it's focusing on behavior as opposed to some sort of characteristics like just smart or kind. And it's a bad thing when it's an attempt to manipulate toward an outcome. Right. And so if you want to know why parents praise, it's because parents want kids who have high self-esteem, who are confident and happy. And those because those things feel like the opposite of anxious or depressed or isolated, where they think they're incapable. They want the opposite of that. They want kids who feel capable, who feel like they confidently move through the world. That that looks like a happy person. The question is, and the problem is, I don't think praise does that. Okay. The idea that praise does that is this very superficial sort of 1980s idea of self esteem that if you tell yourself, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, I'm worth it, then all of a sudden you're going to believe that and you'll move through life that way. Um, but people and children are a little more complicated than that. And children know that we've been using praise to try and make them feel good. There's an interesting study in a book called Nurture Shock, where they asked kids in middle school, what does it mean when one kid is getting a lot of praise from the teacher? And the kid said it means that kid is struggling. They're not doing well. So they see it as manipulation. Okay. And this is 20 years ago when there was less praise than there is now. And um, and then a couple years later, they asked the same kids, what does it mean when one kid is getting more criticism from a teacher? And they said that means that kid is smart. The teacher. So teachers only do that with the kids they know are smart. So there's a clear manipulation in there where we're trying to get a result, and that backfires. Okay. And the reason it backfires is, and if you want to build actual self-confidence and self-esteem, you have to understand that children are looking at two things simultaneously. Okay. One, what they think they're capable of. That's one circle. And the other is what they actually do, what they are actually, you know, doing on a day-to-day basis. And only where those two things cross over, that space in the Venn diagram that where those circles cross, that's self-esteem. Okay. And the more those things align, the higher the self-esteem. So the problem with praise is it's building quite often this huge circle of what you're capable of instead of focusing on helping them develop the discipline of the things they actually do.
Mhm.
So if you want to build self-esteem, hold boundaries that, a simple way to build self-esteem in high school is say, look, you're going to sit with your homework for 2 hours a night, one way or the other. Why? Because that increases the chances they're going to get it done. And you're going to do it in a public space. Why? Because that increases the chances they're going to get it done and not be on their phone. Okay. And when they get it done, they feel proud of themselves. Achievement makes you proud of yourself. Those two circles, what they're capable of and what they actually do cross.
Mhm.
That's a child with self-esteem. It's not some magic thing because you told them over and over again, you're a soccer superstar. You're going to play in the World Cup one day. But then they go out on the field and, they can never get the ball. No one wants to pass
Yeah.
it to them. They know that.
I think it almost breeds mediocrity in a way. And I remember when I was like 6 years old, I played soccer. Our coach never showed up to practice. We saw him one time. We didn't score a single goal. I ran into the goal without the ball. And at the end of the season, we got a participation trophy. But I remember distinctly thinking, it's like, why am I getting a trophy? I didn't
Yeah.
do anything. We sucked the whole season. So
Yeah.
it's A
Yeah.
society that is just handing out participation trophies for work that's not even really that great. And I'm guilty of it too. Like it's just impulsive on my end. Like, oh, that's so good. So I gotta personally dial it back myself.
Yeah, and
We're
with
gonna
little kids, they're it as they get older, it becomes more important that you're not telling them those things because like you kind of heard it as speaking down to you, a little condescending and not true. And that's how kids across the board perceive those things, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. We're gonna get into some quick rapid fire and then we will sign off, my friend.
Great.
All right, because I'm being mindful of your time. All right. So thank you for your advice with the breaks. Now, some personal real life experiences. What would you do in these scenarios? So bath toys. One of my child's responsibilities is to put away his bath toys when he's done. And um, also, just going into the way that you phrase things in your book, too. It's not like, if you don't do this, then we're taking away your bath toys. It's more giving them the choice and the opportunity to make a different decision. So, the way I phrase this is like, okay, you cannot put your bath toys away, but if you don't, then they're going away. We're hiding them. Um, so, he got the consequence in this scenario where the bath toys were no longer available to him. I reintroduced him after a certain period of time. And then at that point, he just decided that he didn't care. He didn't want the bath toys anymore. So in that scenario, what do you do? And I kind of relate this to breaks in the future. So what if eventually they like the breaks and they don't care about them? It doesn't really sting anymore. What do you do?
Yeah. So likes the breaks. Let's make that the second question. So, um, but I will say in terms of the bath toys. So let me ask first, is bath time typically happening in the evening before bed?
Evening.
Okay. And then after bath time, is there books and go to sleep kind of thing?
Yep.
Excellent.
Books in the
So,
bed.
and he looks forward to books, and I assume he wants the reading and he wants certain books. Great. So this is a perfect time to say, to sort of introduce him to the concept of time, right? Create a time and say, look, we've got 20 minutes where we're going to read to you. And that starts in about 3 minutes. But before it starts, the bath toys have to be put away. Um, no, I don't want to put them away. Then don't put them away. But it might mean that you missed the stories. I don't know. I'm going to show you. I'm going to start a time. I'm on the phone, and it's 20 minutes, and the time's going away. Um, and and if you want to wait and not do it, don't do it. If you don't want to put your bath toys away, don't put them away. But it means that you're giving up uh, your book time. No, no, I want to read. Why you read to me? Oh, don't. Like, look, I love to read to you. I want to read to you. I enjoy that time. But but before you read, you have to put away your bath toys. No, I don't want to put away my bath toys. I can't make you put away your bath toys. But if you want the reading, that no, I don't want to put away my bath toys. Then don't put away your bath toys. So you're just making a simple map, right? It's like you've come to a fork in the road, my friend. It's a simple cognitive map. Down this road is you don't have to put away your bath toys, but there are no books down that road. Down this road, you put away your bath toys and you have book time. I'm okay with either decision. You decide. You're in charge of you. This is how you raise a protagonist in that scenario. You let them know you're in control, as opposed to, yours is a more common response. If you don't do it, I'm going to do this. Okay. You're not putting him in the driver's seat. We want to put him in the driver's seat. Look, I can't make you put away bath toys. I'm tired of putting them away, so I don't want to do it. Um, when you finish putting them away, then we start books. That's it.
Mhm.
Put them away. Don't put them away. No, no. If you need to cry and scream, cry and scream. But books are going to end in 20 minutes. Just so you can see, I'm going to start the timer. This is how it works. And maybe there's a little circle that moves. When this disappears, this is the book time getting smaller. And when it disappears, there's no book time. You still have plenty of book time left. No, I want my book time. Yeah. Well, you
Me
still have
too.
18 minutes of book time. I mean, maybe you want it, maybe you don't. I don't know. I don't know. What do you want? Right. So, um, that's the first part. Then in terms of liking the breaks, I've gotten lots of calls from parents that they do the break process. They see a really good change. And then one day, their daughter wakes up and their 5-year-old goes, I like breaks. I want breaks. And so you give them a break and they go, great, I love breaks. And they sit down at the end of the break, see your break's over. And they go, no, no, I want to stay in my break. I like them. It's just, that's the scientist. They're just conducting an experiment. And the experiment is, if I like the consequence, will they stop doing it? Will it stop having power? It's not that they like breaks, but they're committed to the experiment. Right?
Yep.
They're gonna do it.
They're smart.
And so the best thing is to go, and they might even go, "I like breaks, can I have a break?" They might come up and ask you, "Sure, which one did you want? Did you want the 1, the 3, or the 5?" "I
Yep.
want the 3." And then you go, "Okay, you can sit right there." And they go, "No, no, I changed my mind." "Oh, once you ask for the break has to go the regular way. It is the 3-minute break." You know, nothing personal, but you asked for it, and once you say it, that's how that works. Um, you know, Next time, you might want to ask for a small one, and then you can just repeat as often as you want. That's okay too. Just take the charge out, make them, but you still hold that space. You know,
What about nap time? So this actually just happened the other day. So is there any leeway if you know that there is actually something else going on and they're just tired, they don't know how to deal right now? So um the other day he needed a break just because of whatever he was doing at the time. And then it got to the point where he's like, hold me. So he wanted me to put him to sleep on my shoulder.
yeah, yeah.
What do
During
you
the
do in that
break.
scenario? Yep.
Well, typically, I'm not going to ever change a break to a cuddle. I
Yeah.
want self-regulation, and I want that to be very clear. And so it's like, hey, I would love to hold you, but I have to wait till the break is finished. During the break, you sit by yourself, and then let him have a tantrum around that. And go, I know it's a drag. I'm always happy to give you a cuddle, but during the break, you have to sit by yourself. As soon as it's done, we'll do the break. I mean, we'll do a cuddle. I'm okay with that. And then they have a tantrum. It's like, oh, the rules still apply on the break. So, if they started a 1-minute break and then half 30 seconds in, they're like, no, I want you to hold me. It's like, we can do it after. And then they escalate and they get out of the chair. It's like, oh, when you get out of the chair, it becomes a 3-minute break. So they have to play through that because they're gonna see, does the map hold? Can I
Yeah.
retrain you? Am I the one who makes the rules and the boundaries? And so you do want a structure that's strict while you handle it in a way that's kind and non-judgmental.
It's like they're looking for chinks in the armor,
Yeah,
pretty much.
and it's natural. It's like that's why humans dominate the planet. We're really good adapters. We're really good problem solvers. We're looking for patterns. We're adapting. Why would our children be any different?
Mm, awesome. Well, Joe, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, brother. Thank you so much for your time. If you're open to it, I would love to have you back on to discuss what else you've learned in the future. Maybe if you have a new book coming out. Where could people find your content? Where could they find your book? And how could they reach you if they were looking for an online consultation?
Yeah, so raisinglions.com. That's your number one bit information. At raisinglions.com is my website. You can book a discovery call. You can send me, queries about teacher training. Um, you sign up for a webinar. Um, and then, you know, once once I find out about parents' struggles or if they're a good fit for me, parents are often doing a sort of a consult or a series of consults, a little package just to turn around problems that they're having with their kids. And those, I make those available after I've gotten to know people. But they can reach out and book an initial call sort of to find out their options and help solve their problems. And, yeah, there's an Instagram, Raising Lions. There's a TikTok, which is Raising Lions One. Um, yeah, so that's, I guess those are your
Perfect.
basics, right? So yeah,
Gotcha.
we're doing a little bit of rebuild. I was going to say my assistant, my daughter has joined the business, I
Nice.
guess you talked to yesterday, and so and then we'll be working on the next book in the coming months.
Awesome, brother. Love it. And you have the podcast that you said you were working on as well, right?
Yeah, we started to do a podcast, but we just did a little pause just as we're kind of settling on a bigger business plan and kind of how do we create opportunities for parents to engage with us on a lot of different levels. And so we'll do, my daughter and I will be doing a podcast together, and that'll probably start up again in about a month. And yeah, that we'll primarily be talking with parents with struggles and what those look like, and different perspectives on using the method or solving certain problems from kids that have been diagnosed with behavior problems to just ordinary everyday parenting struggles and school struggles. So
Real life stories. That's what I like to
yeah,
hear.
yeah. Good.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah, it was
again,
good to talk to you. It's nice to meet you. Say hello to your wife, and I'm glad you guys you're doing this. I appreciate the
thank you, man.
conversation.
It's a godsend, honestly. Night and day difference, just as you said. The next day he's saying, I love you guys. I'm like, we haven't heard that for a while. So
No,
very grateful for your work, man. Again, thank you so much for your advice and for your time. And hopefully this is provide some value to the other parents out there that may be struggling. So God bless.
great. Well, thank you for reaching out.